We got an epic guest today on the Fun Friday podcast. I am Craig McGrouther, your host. Before we get into the show, everyone, we've got our summit event coming up in New York City, September 14th and 15th. You've heard us talk about it all on the other channel. I rarely do my, ad reads here, if you will. This show is for the people, by the people, and all that good stuff. But if you're looking to go to a commercial real estate event to meet with great people, meet our partners, meet our capital formation helpers there, if you will, if you're looking to raise capital, looking to invest capital, anything in between, the ecosystem is there for you to take advantage of. So go to our website, learn about the podcast, or learn about our event coming up there. But onto the podcast, we got a special guest. Wealth Without Wall Street is here. We got Joey Mure. How are you today, my friend?
Oh, Craig, good to be in the room with like-minded people, man. I love it.
Yeah, and did I get your name right? I apologize if I got it wrong.
Oh, dude, you nailed it. Most people
Good.
brutalize it, so I'm grateful.
Well, you can tell by my name with you get capitalizations in there. You get a couple syllables there. My name is always mispronounced, but it does not bother me whatsoever. I will say Greg doesn't annoy me, but it's like, hey, it's not Greg, it's Craig. But I let it slide usually because I know people aren't doing it to bother me. But that said, let's get into your story. This is about you today, Joey. How did you get into the shoes and the position you're in today, where you've got a beautiful office? It looks like you're in right now. How did you develop the life you had and your investment philosophies, which I would say are a skosh contrarian to the average person?
That's a great summation. I'll tell you what, though, you said this is about me, but I'll tell you, it's about everybody who's listening right now because I don't think of myself as totally different than that person. I was the guy who was in the corporate world. It was in the mortgage business for 11 years. And during that time, I was following all of the traditional financial advice, right? I went to school, I got good grades, I got a good job. I started moving up in the ranks and building. For me, I was in my late 20s making over $300,000 in the mortgage business,
And
managing
what
the
year was that, by
team.
the way?
This was probably, what was that, 2009, somewhere in
Well,
there.
I just want to caveat that $300,000 in 2009 was a what ton of money, and it still is a lot of money today. But I think we all know that COVID inflation changed the perception of dollars. But being able to make that level of coin at that time is quite remarkable. When cost of living was a skosh lower, when you're coming out of a financial crisis, so to be making
That's
cash
right.
like that and doing mortgages in a time like that is impressive nonetheless. So I just had to caveat there and put some respect on it.
Well, for sure. And to your point, it definitely spent a lot more back then than it does today. But I was looking up and I thought, you know, this is more than what I would have anticipated I was able to make at this age of my life. And I was like looking around, I was like, but I don't feel successful in the way that I thought that would feel like. Does that make sense? It's like, oh man, I'm after this higher income, but higher income is not actually freedom. That's what I learned. I was like, I'm actually working sometimes 50, 60 hours a week. And at the time, my wife, she didn't work, and we have five girls now, but at the time we were, young family, two or three kids at the time. And I recognized that, man, my time was getting taken from me, and I wasn't able to spend the quality of time with the people that I love the most. The real couple of aha moments, if I can just share one of them. I was at the beach with my family, and I told them, I was like, hey, you guys go on down to the beach and I'll be right behind you. I just have to take this one more phone call. And what happened? 3 or 4 hours later, I'm walking down the boardwalk behind the beach house, and there's my family walking up that same boardwalk. And we pass each other, and their faces said everything. They were disappointed. They were like, Dad, you're here, but you're not here, right? Like mentally, you're miles away because you have never turned off work. You're just working in a different location. You're not actually with us. And it may, I didn't know the answer at the time, Craig, but I knew that what I was doing financially and professionally was not getting me more of what I want. It was actually taking me farther away. And so, anyways, I recognized I needed a change. In 2009, that was when I learned, I read a book that totally shifted the way I had to forget the old ways and I had to kind of go on a different path forward.
Can you share which book that was?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the book was called Become Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash. And in this book, and it was interesting because I was a banker, like I was a mortgage banker, and so I'm
Yeah.
like, become your own banker. You didn't understand exactly the premise, but you get into it. And he talked about taking control of your finances, right? Instead of what does the world tell us to do with our money? And you should invest with Wall Street. You should just put your money in Wall Street and let somebody else manage it for you. You should abdicate that to somebody else. You're not an investor. You don't have the credentials. You didn't go to school to learn the volatility and the cycles and the all the many complexities of the market. So you just need to hand your money to somebody else and let them babysit it. And then hopefully 40 years from now, you wake up and there's this pile of money that you can then ride off into the sunset and just never run out of money, that you start peeling dollars off the top of that mountain and you can quote unquote retire and start living the life that you want to then. And I'll tell you, I learned that that is a lie. Like all those things were keeping me head down, focused on what my work was today and hoping in the future and not having an actual strategy that created freedom today. And guess what, Craig? You don't have kids yet, but when you do, you're going to look up and they're going to want to spend time with you when they're 4, 5, 8, 10. But when they get to 16, they're gone. They are gone. And those moments you will never get back, but you pay for them with regret. And so I'll just tell you, you need a different path. And I'm so grateful I read that book because it shifted all of that. And I said, man, I have to make a change. I have to start doing things differently to expect different results.
Without a doubt. I think there's a lot to unpack there, but from your initial comments, uh, the never enough syndrome that you get as a high functioning individual, that's something that, you know, you accomplish a goal and then you realize that there's a new goal, and it's kind of the Scotty Scheffler moment, which is, hey, and for those who don't know, Scotty Scheffler is the number one golfer in the world. He's probably, bankrolled about 150 million bucks the last couple of years, between endorsements and, sponsor and winnings and stuff like that. But kind of just talked about, hey, you get the pleasure for 2 moments and then what's for dinner next, right? So it's what he's basically saying, though, and what I heard there is, this is all special, but there's nothing more special than seeing Bennett, his baby, come up and play with his trophy and kissing his wife after winning. That to him is what he loves, and the process in his day to day, not the, glory of winning for 2 minutes. Now, granted, if he won less, maybe the wins would mean more. But if you're in the business world and you're kind of also always used to winning, in the sense of, for myself, raising dollars, successfully kind of closing the capital stack, attracting new people, turning yeses into nos, and kind of going down the business development pipeline for people that said, yeah, we're not working with you, you're too young, to next thing you know, they're funding our deals, which I've seen tons of times. And it's the most fulfilling moment in that second. And then it's like, okay, who's the next, right? So you just gotta keep that in mind. But the never enough syndrome will always travel around and always be kind of present with high functioning individuals, where it's always the next deal, always the next deal. But you got to be present for the people around you. So I kind of hear some of that there. And it's also one of those things where you will level up, but do you actually get more time back? How do you actually get time freedom? And that's actually, from a career perspective, why I moved over to Lone Star Capital and why I'm actually able to be where I am today, to make this whole circle, is regarding why I'm able to go and be where I am today is because I made the career switch from being able to work with Lone Star Capital, where as long as I have a Wi-Fi connection, I'm able to, do my job, do my career, as opposed to, being in Phoenix, Arizona, selling homes, where I can only make money where my feet are. So I'm very grateful for that switch, and that was kind of an intentionality play, where the only thing I'm looking to do is to get in the vehicle to get me for more financial freedom. And if that was by way of selling homes or kind of working in the private equity world, it would make sense. So everything you said there, I really relate to, and I've kind of tried to design my life for that perspective there. So all things there that are super thought provoking. And I think if you're doing well in life, it's important to take inventory of that, then also figure out how can I spend my time today? Because you can always make more money, but you can't get your time back, especially with children and stuff like that. So I'm designing my life right now to put systems and capital in place where I can buy back my future freedom to be with my kids, my significant others, family, stuff like that, spend time with my parents while they're around. So with that said, what are some of the decisions you made, from that mortgage world where you switched your kind of decision making, switched your investment patterns? What switched once you were aware of these new ideas?
Well, I'll tell you, I quit putting money into money traps and I started putting money into my own control so that I could then become an investor. And I say that for a reason because let's say that people like you're listening to this right now and you're a successful businessman and you're like, oh man, I've really done great in business, so I can invest. I can just put money wherever and it should work. Wrong. Like that's a wrong answer. Because being a business owner, being an investor, are two very different skill sets and two very different things you have to be educated on, right? I'm sitting here and I've got my shirt on. I don't know if everybody can see it, but I've got my
Beautiful shirt.
passive income t-shirts, really fancy, but says passive income, and most people are like, well, is that really true? Like, can you have passive income? The answer is yes, but passive income does not mean uninvolved income. It means in order to get passivity to anything, you have to be active on the front end. And part of that is I have to learn to be an investor. I have to learn how to look at a pitch deck and recognize red flags so that I can do the due diligence beyond that. I have to be able to look at a PPM and understand what I'm reading. It's a lot of legal jargonese, and you have to understand what that means. You have to understand who you are as an investor. Like, what's your unique investor DNA profile and which things line up with you? What's your investor buy box? Like, draw that out so that you can say no to more things than you say yes to. That's kind of like the Warren Buffett approach, right? He has built a box that he says, if it's outside of this, I'm out. And he can say no to 98 things in a day versus the two that he really needs to say yes to. And so I say that to say, I stopped putting money into money traps. I started putting money into my control. And then I began the process of becoming an investor. And I say process because, man, I learned a lot of lessons the hard way over that process. And I want to help other people maybe take and pay wholesale for what I paid retail for.
I love that. So you mentioned process, you mentioned kind of changing that, and then you also mentioned money traps. What would you define as a money trap?
Well, great question. And most people are going to think I'm crazy for some of these, but I hope to kind of make some believers on this show today. If I said, man, my goal is financial freedom today, okay? And I don't care if you're 25, 35, 45, today is the day that you want to be financially free, then the things you put money into have to create freedom for you today. And how we would define that is the same way as Robert Kiyosaki does, when your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses. Okay, I have more passive income coming in the door than what my lifestyle requires every single month. I can pull up the calendar on my phone and I can say, man, I got to put everything on that calendar this week. Like nobody else dictated to me what got put on the calendar. I got to do it. But you can only do that when your passive income exceeds your monthly expenses. So when I get $1 in the door that's excess and I put it into a vehicle, it has to produce either a passive income or reduce a monthly expense, right? Or it's not helping me get closer to financial freedom, right? So everybody's kind of nodding their head. Yeah, okay, I get that. Well, okay, so how much money should I put in my 401k then? The answer is zero. But you're like, wait a minute, hold on. Prove it to me. I'm going to say your 401k is the worst place that you can put money to get to financial freedom today. Again, you have to have that lens. Why is that? Well, how much passive income does it produce for you today? Answer is zero, right? How much does it reduce your monthly expenses? Answer is zero. Now, some people say, whoa, 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 Joey, two things you're forgetting. My employer or my business matches my 401k. So that's free money. You're telling me to give up free money? Like, that doesn't sound like financial freedom. Say, wait a minute, but how much of that money can you access today? Zero. So is it helping you get closer to or further from? It's actually taking you further from. But Joey, you don't understand. This is giving me a tax deduction today. Like a 401k, I get to deduct that. But what it is you're deferring taxes. You're not reducing taxes. You're deferring them to a time in the future. And I liken this to back in my mortgage days. So Craig, I'm sitting down with you. I'm in the mortgage business. I'm telling you, hey, we're going to get you closed on this house. And here's your mortgage docs. And I put them across the table to you. And I say, you're going to borrow $500,000. You're going to pay it for 30 years. It's on this property. And you look down and you say, well, the rate says TBD. And I'm like, yeah, we're just going to tell you what the rate is 30 years from now. Okay, so you just sign below. You just go ahead and sign because this is your new mortgage. You're going to pay it for 30 years, and we're going to tell you what the rate is then. How likely are you to sign that document?
Pretty unlikely, most likely. I would say there's not much certainty there, right? And I see where this is going.
Well, you tell me, what is your 401k going to be taxed at?
Yeah.
The answer is nobody knows. In fact, your accountant, who may have even told you, hey, this is one of the only ways you can reduce your taxes, put money in a qualified plan, they can't tell you what the rate's going to be because nobody knows what 30 years from now is going to be. There's a whole lot more reasons, but I'll just tell you, it is one of the worst places. If you want to be financially free today, you have to have access to the money, and it has to be able to either produce a passive income or reduce a monthly expense. And a 401k does none of those three, right? So that's a money trap. Equity in your house is a money trap, right? Because it doesn't create passive income today. It doesn't reduce the monthly expense because you still have a mortgage. I'm not saying a paid off house. I'm saying paying down your mortgage faster does not help you get to financial freedom. And thirdly, if you ever want access to the equity in your house, you have to either sell it or borrow it from somebody else against it, like a bank would have to do. And so
a HELOC.
Yeah, or a HELOC. Yeah, those things do not create financial freedom. There's way more of these money traps, but those are like the top two that I feel like people constantly like, oh, wait a minute. I've been doing those things because there's some good things about them. But do they support your goal of financial freedom today? And the answer is no.
I guess the only caveat would be to your point. Well, Joey, you mentioned if I put more money down, does that lower an expense on a mortgage? Does that potentially fall into that bucket though? If let's say you had $100,000, you want to pay down $100,000 of debt, and maybe you're lowering your mortgage payment by $500. But Joey, I could lower my mortgage payment by X amount. Why is that not a good idea?
Well, then I would just say, Craig, I want you to tell me about the upcoming deal that you have. And I want you to tell me if it would make more sense for me to pay down a 5 or 6% mortgage rate or to earn 15% on this next deal that you have. Which one is going to cost me? It would cost me more to pay down a mortgage at a tax deductible 6.5%, let's just say what the current market rate is, than to earn 14, 15, 16, whatever the
arbitrage difference. Yeah.
It's just crazy that I would think, the people that think like what you're talking about, like I want to reduce my monthly expense by paying all this money towards equity in my house. They either are scarce to think there's nothing else I could earn more at, or they're just not exposed to what else is out there. And my goal, Wealth Without Wall Street, exists to help people be exposed to what else is out there and to give them a path that will give them financial freedom. Not just like basement, bargain price this deal and say, well, the only thing I can do is pay down debt because it's not going to help them get to their end goal.
Right. And that's a very interesting thought there. In many respects, it's not conventional, but basically your premise here is that although it's not a bad idea to do, Roth IRAs, 401ks, perhaps pay down some potential debt, it's not optimizing the arbitrage play. And I think another thing that's very interesting for people to think about is just the whole inflation and time value of money concept, which is the longer you have a note for, the more power the borrower gets because the dollars really do depreciate over the course of time. So as time goes on, you, the holder, you, the individual there, have to realize that as the loan goes on, the borrower is in the benefit of holding that paper and holding that debt. And it's funny,
100%.
people always say, hey, if you can't beat your whatever, you got to look at paying down your debt as you only want to and probably pay down your debt if you can't beat X%, rate, right, of investment, right? Is that a fair assessment, Joey?
That's right. Yeah, that's how people are definitely thinking for sure.
Yeah, and this is another concept that I know we wanted to kind of talk about, which is debt freedom does not equal financial freedom, which is very much so a Robert Kiyosaki principle and premise in many respects. But I would love to hear kind of how you've come to these realizations and what you mean by that statement fully.
Yeah, well, think about the formula again. And this is not a Joey, came up with this. This is just facts. If I have more passive income than I have monthly expenses every single month, I'm free, right? And so while part of your monthly expenses include debt payments, all of your monthly expenses are not debt payments. They include things like food, gas, utilities, medication, whatever the case, like your cost of living will never go away whether you have no debt or not. In fact, as we've seen in the last 5 years, inflation, the cost of living has gone completely higher and higher and higher, and it's going to continue. So if you only focus on paying off debt, you're never going to actually be free because the cost of living is going to be there. We have to focus on the other side of the equation, which is why I love being on a podcast with somebody who is raising capital for deals that will far exceed what they can earn in other places, because I want to focus on creating passive income so that I can outrun inflation, I can outrun the cost of debt and monthly expenses. So does that make sense? Like, we have to start thinking aggressively offensively to build that versus just defensively. Well, I guess I can just pay off this debt. That we have to start forcing ourselves to be investors.
Yeah, and I think the premise here to think about is playing for equity lifts, not reduction of cost plays. And equity lifts, particularly if you're younger, makes sense. Now, the older you get, you may like the fixed income products if you're kind of at the retirement age. If you basically said, I'm not going to actively make any money moving forward, then your strategy can definitely switch. But if you're Joey's age, if you're my age, I'm 31, Joey, you're probably 32 as well. You look so young and so vibrant. Surely, even though you've got five daughters, I'm sure you're basically close to my age. I understand. You want to play the equity lift game there. So that's kind of the concept that it seems like you're kind of ingraining here. And it's funny. I remember I did pay off my car. It was kind of one of my loan conditions in my house. And Rob's like, well, just give me the paper there. Give me the $15,000 and then I'll do whatever. He was basically just kind of throwing it in my face, exactly to your point. And obviously, he's very comfortable with that. So do you seem to be comfortable as well. Where if you're comfortable with debt, you want to make sure that you can leverage it. And another Robert Kiyosaki principle is that now that that banking is now fractional reserves, it's off the gold standard.
Yep.
They're basically creating dollars out of thin air. They're basically distributing it. For every dollar that you give, the bank can borrow out and loan 90 cents on that. So it's backed on nothing. So debt is actually a new form of currency in many respects. And on that leverage, so should you have good leverage and good debt, is how you really create millions and millions of dollars in equity and opportunities. So let's get into investor DNA and how you kind of qualify individuals and kind of learn about what they're looking for to see if it's a mutually beneficial match to kind of go forward with something that would make sense, because everyone obviously is looking for different things with regard to their comfort and profile.
Yeah, and this is something that we discovered along the way. We got into some different investments that just didn't really fit us personally. And we realized that, man, not every investment should everybody do. You probably have people that come on the show, and I'm sure others have listened to other shows, and they're like, man, this guy is killing it in short term rentals. Maybe I should do short term rentals. Or this guy is killing it in fill in the blank, land investing or whatever. And you're like, maybe that's what I should do. But the issue is, if you don't align from a personality standpoint with that investment, you should not do it. I don't care what the ROI is. If you go chasing ROI, that's a really quick way to lose all your money, right? Because you have to align with it. We developed this profile. It's based off of like the disc profile, if you're familiar with that, right? You got the driver personality, the influencer personality, the steady kind of loyal personality, and then the conscientious kind of cautious personality. Those are the main four, and then there's variations from there. But what this profile does is it tells you who you are, and then it gives you a matrix of like 16 different passive investing ideas and what the pros, cons, and resources that are necessary to be successful in each one. So then you can almost use it as a filter, Craig, and you say, well, man, I'm a high influencer. Well, let's look at these 16, and some of those you just immediately check off like, nope, nope, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. But the ones that really align with you, you can say, let me dig into this and figure out if there's a way for me to get involved in it. And I'll just tell you from an influencer standpoint, I think you and I talked about that's kind of your personality. An influencer would be really bored with like a standard long term rental. Because guess what? What can you do to that property after you've maybe renovated it? You've got it on the market, you've got a renter in there, and someone else is managing the property. All you do is you sit there and wait. And then the check comes, and then the Surf Pro bill hits because they flooded the basement or whatever. And you're just like, this stinks. I mean, this is getting rich really slow. I can't affect it in any way, shape, or form. But then you add into maybe like a short term rental, it's still the same piece of property, right? But now it's got a different purpose. I'm going to do this on a short term rental. Will they have higher profit margins? They have more ability for you to share it with others and like, hey, I could let somebody, one of my friends stay there. And it's like this, you get more involved in it. And so that would be a difference maker. Whereas you've talked to somebody who's a really cautious, conscientious kind of person, they would probably hate short term rentals because guess what? They have to interact with people and they have to be more social and they have to be more kind of put it out there and let people know that they have the cabin that everybody
And
rents from. You know,
and you have
that
to live with the potential downside of maybe a slow season or the lack
the
of consistency or
seasonality.
steadiness. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So my point is take the profile, learn who you are, and then try to filter from there to build your buy box. Because if you don't do it in that order, man, I've heard just horror stories of people that think, well, man, if this is how all investing is, I don't even know if I really want to do it. This is lame. This is boring. But man, you get the right one and it aligns with you, you can go fast in the right direction.
I love that. So let's talk about another thing that's huge. Obviously, your shirt is very indicative to the next topic, which is passive income, and how you went from 2,500 to $50,000 a month, which is remarkable. I think everyone goes through milestones, right? You get to 500 bucks, then $1,000 then after $1,000 you go crazy and you say, let's get to 10,000, so on and so forth. And I'm sure your goal, knowing you being ambitious, is probably to get to $100,000 a month. Would probably be your, hey, once I'm there, life's really, really gravy, right? But what were some of the texts that you took, or the steps that you took to kind of get there? And can you kind of rehash that journey?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, man, a lot
And
of the things.
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, a lot of the things that we learn are always in the rearview mirror. As we look backwards and we say, we probably could have done this faster if we did this, this, and this. We probably should have
Reverse
taken,
engineer it.
yeah, we probably should have learned what our investor DNA was. By the way, we created that because of all the things that we did wrong. And so part of the things that we did is we actually created a system. And this is one of those, like, I believe, one of the biggest missing pieces that people don't even know that they need. And we call it the passive income operating system, but it's just a means to the end of how do I automate some of, like, when money comes into my world, what happens with it? Is it just like this free for all in my checking account that all of my bills get pulled out of there, my taxes get pulled out of there? I'm trying to invest out of that same account. How much is left over? Like, there's all these question marks. We created a system that people can organize their cash flows, that then get them into a position to start saving money in a place that they can actively use and they can access at any time, that's always growing on their behalf. Once we built that system, then we became investors. And the investor process, I'll just tell you, you said, what steps have we taken? We made a lot of steps in the wrong direction, investing things we didn't understand and didn't do our proper due diligence with the operator or the sponsor, or even know the difference between a sponsor and an operator. Like, those are things we had to learn the hard way, unfortunately. But once we started doing that, we started to recognize, these are the things that really get us closer to what we're trying to accomplish. And we recognize, if we don't have an operator in a passive investing opportunity, if it has to be us being in an operating position of any sort, we're out. Like, it just is not going to work, because we're just not really good operators at the end of the day. Like, we know how to run our business, but you try to get us in anything else, it's just not going to work well. So we built the system, we became investors, and we just continued to circulate that over and over. It's like a perpetual system. And by the way, one of the things we'll give away to your audience is an ebook that we call the Passive Income Operating System, that you can see all the components I'm talking about. Sometimes it's hard to hear it audibly, but to see it visibly, we can break this down into step by step, and you can actually put this together for yourself. But that, to me, was the big game changer, and that's what we now help other people put in place.
I love that. So, what are some of the investments, and how do you structure out your current portfolio to achieve your monthly return of, that large, grandiose 50K a month?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, we do have a handful of syndications that we're involved in. Some are in the multifamily space, mobile home parks, oil and gas, things of that nature. We also have some that are, but I'll tell you, we have less in those because of our personalities. Like, we are more in that influencer kind of genre, where we want to have some sort of help in the process, and you really can't do much when you're just an LP investor, right? But there's a lot of people that's what they need to do, right? They need to be an LP because it aligns with who they are. In our case, we actually blazed a trail on a couple of things. Like, we started a short-term rental business, and it grew to like 27 units in about 18 months. We grew that, had a lot of good cash flow from it, and then we sold it to our operator. That was a big part of our growth. We built a land flipping business with 3 operating partners, where we go out and we buy raw land, and we buy it for 20 to 30 cents on the dollar. We sell it to a retail buyer at roughly 100% retail value. So it's about a 3 to 4x of what we bought it.
Do you
And
zone and entitle it and kind of give it shovel ready and such, or?
no, we don't even do any of that. We literally, these are just small lots. I'm talking, these are $2,500 to $5,000 to $10,000 lots we buy, and we sell them for 4 times what we buy them for on terms. And so we now make it as a note payment back from that retail buyer. So a simple example would be, we buy something for $2,500, we sell it for $10,000, but instead of it being $10,000 cash, we make it very affordable. and we say, hey, we'll give it to you for 1,000 down and let's say 250 a month for what, 50 months or whatever that number is. And so we do that over and over and over again. And that note income per month right now is like $26,000 per month.
And I imagine
So
you're in
it's a
first
large
position on that.
percentage of what we've been able to build as that 50,000. But we also get involved in Turo. I rented an RV. By the way, that was a negative return. Do not get into renting RVs. They're like the money pit on wheels. But there's tons more things, but those are kind of like some of the highlights.
I love that. All makes sense. And I mean, I imagine on the deals there, you're probably in first position, I would assume.
On the land deals?
Yes. If you're doing like a seller
Yes,
carry
yeah.
of sorts. Yeah. Very
Yep,
cool.
100%.
And then finally, I know that's something that you're very passionate about, which is infinite banking. So maybe just if you could break it down to like a fifth grade, eighth grade, comprehension level, what the heck is infinite banking other than a very provocative and interesting sounding name?
Infinite banking is one of the key components of that book that I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Become Your Own Banker by Nelson Nash. He talked about this vehicle that most people don't even think about, or they think about in a negative light because of the way it's marketed in the world. But he said, if you want to be like a bank, you have to do what banks do, not what they say. And what's one of the things that banks do with their money? If you think about that for a second, Craig, like when you put money on deposit at a bank, they now take that money and they lend it out to other people. To your point earlier, for $1 on the books, they can lend out 90 cents, or they can actually do 9 times or 10 times what they actually have on the books. But that's how they make their money, right? They take our money, they lend it to somebody else, and they make the squeeze in between, right? Whatever they pay you in interest versus the interest that they earn. Well, then it begged the question, and he talks about this in the book, what do they do with their money? And you think, well, I mean, if I look at a balance sheet of any bank, they're going to have lots of money in real estate. Fair? Like they're always going to have the high rises, the really beautiful buildings. They're going to have the marble floors and everything else. And you're like, well, that must be where they put most of their money. Well, you'd be right, but it's actually, you go down that same balance sheet and there's one line item that says cash value life insurance. And do you know, at the time that I read that book, this is in 2009, Wells Fargo was the bank I worked for. They had 11 to 12 billion dollars in real estate on their balance sheet, but they had 18 billion in cash value life insurance. You're like, wait a minute. So you're telling me that a bank has that much more in cash value life insurance than they do in real estate? Something must be different, because at the time that I learned this, Craig, I went to the regional vice presidents of the bank that I worked for, and I was like, hey, what do you think about cash value life insurance? Like, I've been reading about this in this book and I'm trying to understand it. And they all said, Joey, that's the worst place to put money. Like, nobody puts money in cash value life insurance. And I'm like, that's interesting, because the bank you work for is literally insuring your life as we speak and putting large sums of money towards it. So what do they know that we don't? Well, cash value life insurance as a vehicle, when it's designed properly, and I say that specifically because this isn't a Northwestern Mutual, like your buddy who you graduated college with who sells Northwestern. That's not what this is about. They don't set this up the way that we're talking about. State Farm, like, you're not going to go down the street and get this set up. You have to have somebody that understands the concept. And when you do it right, you have large amounts of cash value that are built up in these systems of policies. And I say that because my business partner and I have over 40 policies between us. We insure ourselves, our kids, our wives, each other business and investment partners. It becomes this large system. But when you have money in these, you can go to the insurance company at any time and say, I would like to borrow X amount of money, up to 100% of the cash value that you have. and I would like to borrow it against the cash value that I have and go and do a deal with Craig. I would like to go do a deal with land investing. I would like to go do a deal. But guess what? They don't care what you're going to do with it, because their liability to you is your death benefit. And so they will lend you on very, very decent terms. I'm talking roughly 5 to 6% interest on an interest only, non structured loan. Okay, so what I mean by that, Craig, I can go borrow $100,000 against my policy today. They will send me the money overnight, 2 days, however long it takes, a couple days to ACH into my account. I can go do a deal with you on your upcoming thing, and I have no required repayment on that loan, although it is accruing interest on an annual basis at 5.5%. Now, why is this important? Because the place that I store my capital needs to have the best benefits. Well, if I can leverage it at any time for any purpose, and I can allow my capital to continue to grow, because guess what? I'm not using my capital, I'm using the insurance company's capital. They're lending me their money. My money continues to grow, compounding uninterrupted for the rest of my life, tax free. I then use their money to go do the deals that I want to do to create the 50,000 a month that I've shared with you that we've created. And we update that every month on our podcast, by the way. But I can then use that money to go leverage into much, much better deals outside of the policy. So why is this such a good tool? Well, I get my dollar growing, I get the dollar outside of my policies growing, and it's producing passive income in the meantime. Not to mention, whenever I pass, it's going to pass to the next generation tax free. And some people would say, well, I don't need life insurance. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I think we were talking about that ahead of time, Craig. And my question to you is not how much life insurance do you need? My question is how much cash do you need to get to your goal? And all we're talking about is substituting a savings account or a checking account with a much better vehicle. It happens to have a death benefit, but that's not the purpose that we lead with. We want our cash to grow guaranteed with tax-free benefits along the way and have the leverage capability so it never stops growing on our behalf. That is the critical part about this. If it had no death benefit, it would still be better than my savings or checking account. And so that's kind of where we have built this whole system around.
It makes a lot of sense, particularly if you can borrow at, 5, 6% interest only. Well, as we mentioned, if you invest X amount of dollars and that's your cash flow, and then everything else accrues with any debt service from the cash flow, and then the equity lift essentially is free. So that's the kind
100%.
of, assuming the deal, doesn't go under, it's a very, very big no-brainer in many respects.
For sure, for sure. And that's so you can get how whenever I start talking about debt, I'm not scared of it. It's just a tool, right? Debt is a tool. And that's why you hear Robert Kiyosaki make comments like, I'm $1 billion in debt, right? He gets the fact that debt is a tool to make like ridiculous amounts of wealth with it, but it has to be managed properly and you have to do it in a way that's smart. So when I can have debt against a policy that is not required repayment, man, it allows a lot more flexibility and freedom to be able to do whatever I need to do, whether it's, if the deal doesn't start paying out cash flow for a year, I'm not really that worried about it. And so anyways, that's kind of there's a whole lot more behind that. We actually do webinars on this and, teach a lot more in depth because it's not just the first time you hear it that oh yeah, I need to do that. Sometimes it takes multiple times of seeing it and understanding it. And yeah, it's just been such a critical part of our story. We just want to pass it along to others.
No, I appreciate that. I'm sure you've got a very comprehensive and detailed iteration that maybe could show the intricacies of it from maybe a drawn out perspective for those visual learners. With that said, we are coming to a close here, Joey. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can people learn about more of your strategies and potentially investing and working with you and the team at Wealth Without Wall Street?
Yeah, if you go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/fund Friday, we've got a lot of free giveaways there. My contact info. You can join our community for free. There's lots of cool things there. So wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/fund Friday. And please let me know that you heard me here talking with Craig because I always like to connect with people.
I love it. Well, Joey, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you being here. For those who are listening, we appreciate your time today, and we'll see you next week.